Welcome to Inside Outside Innovation, Episode 64. In Part 2 of our interview with Dave Knox, the founder of the Brandery, he talked with Brian about melding cultures between startups and corporations, and also between people even within a corporation. He also gave some tips about how to bridge both gaps. The takeaway? Don't be a tourist. Hi there, everyone. I'm Victory, the producer of Inside Outside Innovation, the podcast that brings you the latest insights from people who know the most about building lean businesses, innovating within corporations, and disrupting industries with passion and precision.
So going back to your book, Predicting the Turn, you talk about different ways that corporations can start thinking about this as a means to accelerating their innovation. And you talk about, acquisition, investment, partnering, and build. Talk a little bit more about some of the models that you're seeing out there and what you're hearing from corporations that are embracing the startup scene.
Yeah, so I think the overarching umbrella for all of this is the big corporations are practicing something called market intelligence. And market intelligence is this term that was kind of coined by the guys over at Touchdown Ventures, where it's about developing the sense of how and when the future of your industry will happen. And I think that's an overarching thing for everyone working in innovation and disruption to keep in mind is it's not just about making an investment or buying a company or pick any of the actions, but it's about understanding how an industry is going to transform and having a sense and a viewpoint that you can take to the stakeholders of your corporation to really drive that behavior and drive that kind of engagement. And that's one of the most interesting things I think comes from external involvement is you only can develop a sense of when the future will happen by engaging with a lot of things, by getting your own pattern recognition of seeing what's taking place, what's getting invested, what is interesting for your business, and feeling what you can do with that. The example I use in the book is talking about the whole subscription commerce space. That the lazy man's version of innovation would have been to look at subscription commerce and said, well, Birchbox is interesting, but we're not a beauty company, so we don't care. Or right. Dollar Shave Club's interesting, but we're not a razor company, so we don't care. Instead, it was looking at the behavior and really read into the fact that $300 million was invested in subscription commerce in 2011 through 2012. That's a pretty good indicator that the future is changing and business models are changing. So everybody should have been asking, what does this change in consumer behavior possibly mean for my business? Instead of just saying there's a threat in our space or we should launch something in this space and a product in a box, if you will.
It comes down to also that obviously startups, all these brand new companies being spun up on that, and they're actively looking for new customers and new partners, and corporations are obviously, for a lot of them, that first step. But yet there's a wide gap between the the tucked and the untucked and the ties and the t-shirts of this cultural gap between startups and corporates. How are you kind of seeing that play out, helping startups themselves being able to effectively communicate and interact with corporations, which again have different value propositions and different resources and everything else that's on the table for them?
Yeah, so I think it takes a cultural understanding on both sides. It's too easy for startups to look at a big company and say what's wrong with them, or for a big company to look and say what's wrong with the startup. Instead, It's kind of understanding the motivations of each side and realizing that there are things that are fundamentally different about each other's culture, but that's okay. And you just have to embrace it and figure out what to do with it. And on one side, you have startups will always say, well, big companies move too slow and it takes too long to make a decision. Yes, that's true in many cases, but it's because of the ramifications of those decisions and the things that take, are driven by being a public company, et cetera. And, on the flip side, the corporations, they don't necessarily understand why the sense of urgency exists on the startup side. Mm-hmm. They think they're just being impatient. And they don't maybe understand that it's because of the burn rate and the startup only has 8 months to live unless they raise funding or keep driving revenue.
Right.
And so it's each side looking and asking what's unique about the culture, why are they behaving that way, and how can we work together understanding that neither of us are right or wrong, it's just uniquely where we're coming from.
And are there particular tactics or techniques you've seen that have been more effective at bridging that gap or bridging the divide?
I think the first thing is just walking in the other company's shoes. So, for a big company, that means getting out there to the communities. Don't do startup tourism where you just go visit Google and Facebook and everyone else, because that's actually not seeing a startup. Those are companies that sometimes are valued higher than the Fortune 500 companies. But it's going out and going to a startup accelerator, go to an incubator, go into the offices of, a 5-6 person company that just got their seed funding, and really experience it, see what it's like, and get to know how these guys think and how they go. Go to the meetups, go to the other things, because there's just a power of going into somebody's village, if you will, and experiencing what that like and what that culture's like, and get time to understand it. It's go be a mentor as well. I think that's one of the things that the marketers at big companies that I know who are doing the best work inside are the ones that give the most to the communities as well. And they're doing mentorship not to feel like they just can tell these startups a lot of stuff and what they can do. They're doing it because there's an opportunity for them to learn themselves and see how, this group of startups and founders, how they think, what they're motivated by, and just be inspired by them as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, getting out there, experiencing it is a huge value. And, mentoring and things of that nature can really, really help. And then I think the flip side with startups is, have a respect for the companies and what they've built and the careers the marketers have chosen, and try and understand what they're going through. Put yourself in the shoes of a company that has to do quarterly reporting to Wall Street, that is dealing with all the issues that big companies are. And what are they going through, and how can you help, and how can you help that person in their shoes as well?
That's an important point too. You think about corporations, and it's interesting to talk a little bit about like who within the corporation should actually be in doing these things. Obviously, if you want the innovation to be accelerated throughout the whole organization, you have to have buy-in from the top. But is there an opportunity for the mid-level manager who wants to increase their innovation and do these things? How can they get involved, and how does that play out at pushing that rock up the hill if top management's not bought into the whole?
Yeah, so I take a little bit of a different view than a lot of people, and I actually don't think there should ever be, roles about innovation at a company. I think innovation is one of those things that's almost everybody's job and responsibility, because every business is changing. And, it's a philosophy we had back when I was working at P&G. There were these digital marketing managers on every team, and the problem we found was those digital experts were amazing at what they did, but they oftentimes became the crutch for the marketers to never actually learn what digital was. The marketing director, the brand manager, they knew they had somebody that was really good at it, so they let them go do that work. And they weren't advancing and learning the skills themselves. So, and I think that same thing is happening with innovation at times. It needs to be something that every brand manager, every marketing director, every general manager gets out there and gets involved. And it's why I actually had a lot of respect for what Unilever did with the Unilever Foundry that Jeremy Bassett helped create, because that program, it had a lot of parts that got a lot of PR, but the most interesting part was actually what they were doing from a mentor standpoint. That they had, I think it was over 200 of Unilever employees raise their hands to be mentors to startups that applied for it. And it was anywhere from the junior marketing manager all the ways up. And that was really powerful because they got a chance to see it, to experience it. And it might have only been an hour or two of their week, but it was an hour or two that they hadn't been doing before that got them involved.
Right. A lot of times just starts that spark so they can actually get more involved as it grows in that. Very interesting. So I guess the final question is, one of the things we like to do with all our guests is ask them, what can we do for you? So what are some of the things that you are seeing in the marketplace or other ways that we can help you and your community grow and exceed in this innovation space?
Yeah, so for me, there's really two things. So one of the first things is with the new year, I actually moved into a new role at our parent company for Rockfish, where I'm now also the managing director for WPP Ventures. So leading the corporate venture investments at an early stage, Series A really is our target for great new companies in marketing tech, ad tech, digital commerce, and retail. So with all of those, always looking for great new companies to look at. So always would love introductions there, and also co-investing with innovation experts, both at venture firms and corporate VCs.
That's the end of another episode of Inside Outside Innovation. We'd love to connect with you through Twitter at the IO Podcast or on our website, insideoutside.io. If you've got a topic or area you'd like us to dig into, let us know, because we'd love to share our insights and invite other experts onto the show so that they can share theirs. Until next time, go out and innovate.